On May 5, 2024, more than 100 people held a protest march from the Nome, Alaska City Hall to the recreation center, chanting, "No more stolen brothers and sisters."
Demonstrators are there to honor lost loved ones and advocate for change in the handling of cases of missing or murdered Native people. This act is prompted by the long-standing crisis of disproportionately high rates of missing persons, cases among indigenous communities across the country, state, and Nome region. The most recent report from the Alaska Department of Public Safety found that there were 166 reported cases of missing Alaska Native or American Indian people from October 2023 through early January 2024. For 40 years, the citizens of Nome have not stopped disappearing, and the authorities seem to be inactive. Or maybe they know something more about it, and for them, the searches are pointless. Nome used to be home to the natives of Inupiat. The area came to the attention of the West in 1898 when 3 Scandinavian Americans discovered gold there. In those years, it was enough to cause a gold rush in Nome. Within a year, the Tent Meadow became a town with a population of about 10,000. The town's history is colorful and dramatic as 20 years later, it had under 900 inhabitants, and today there are under 4,000. There is, of course, a reason for this. Nome is right on the Bering Sea and cut off from the world. The area is relatively deserted. There are no roads or ferry system, so if anyone freezes in these parts for the polar night, they will have to stay until next spring, or use a private jet. In other words, a harsh area that is cut off from the world for several months of the year. Perhaps this is the reason for the many eyewitness accounts of concentrated UFO encounters in the area. When the disappearance cases began, locals initially thought it was the atrocities of a serial killer, but the missing person cases have been going on for over 60 years. Naturally, people disappear all over the world every year, but here the percentage concentration in relation to the population is abnormally high. Furthermore, the disappearances themselves are quite bizarre, and we will look at some of them in just a few seconds. The local authorities explain that the disappearances are linked to excessive drinking by the locals and the harsh climate. The men in these parts drank heavily and after a healthy treat would leave the pub, walk away, and most likely freeze to death in the deep drifts, whereupon the wild animals would carry them off. A very strange explanation, because women disappear and men disappear who have never set foot in the pub. And on top of that, what are these animals that carry away a man without leaving a trace? To be even more fair, you've probably had a bit too much to drink too. Imagine now in this state of temperature with very negative degrees, Celsius, and deep drifts, how far from the pub would you get? But let's see the cases themselves. On August 31st, 2020, Florence Okpealuk's shoes, socks, and jacket were found neatly left in a miner's tent, but there was no sign of the woman. A massive search operation was immediately launched with a helicopter, ground search, robotic submarine, divers, dogs, and many volunteers from the local community. However, Florence was never found. Over the years, the Nome Police Department has enlisted the help of several agencies, including the Alaska State Troopers and the FBI. It has interviewed hundreds of witnesses, but to date, no trace has been found. Witnesses from surrounding tents confirmed that they last saw the woman around 4 p.m. on the 31st of August. And everything was fine with her. Footage from all the cameras in the town has been viewed, including those from the town's exits, but no car is seen leaving Nome. Furthermore, Florence is a caring and loving mother who would never abandon her child. All who know her describe her as a very responsible and executive person. The case remains open today, and anyone who sees Florence Okpealuk or has information about her is asked to contact the Nome, Alaska Police Department. However, this is not an isolated case that remains open due to its mysterious nature. One of the most memorable disappearances in Nome is that of Joseph Balderas, who was a civil servant. On the morning of June 27, 2016, it was discovered that he had failed to show up for work at the town courthouse. His last contact was on Friday when he told co-workers he planned to spend the weekend fishing. Joseph is known for his good reputation and quiet nature, which makes him somewhat popular in town. When the search for him begins, his car is quickly found parked on the side of the highway near the sign for mile 44. There are no signs of assault or other unnatural activity on or around the vehicle. And even more strangely, there are no marks left by Joseph himself, either on the road or in the woods nearby. Balderas appears to have disappeared without a trace from the spot where he left his car. Search dogs are involved in the search for him. When they are led to the car, they start to follow a trail along the road, but suddenly stop and refuse to continue, despite the efforts of their handlers. It is as if Joseph has disappeared in that very spot. It has now been more than 8 years since Joseph Balderas disappeared, in the vicinity of Nome. No one has seen him since, neither alive nor dead. The search for him has lasted a full 5 months, involved various services, and cost considerable money. However, nothing has been found to shed light on his fate. A year later, the city court officially declared him dead. The case of Joseph Balderas remains among the most unsolved mysteries in Nome's history. At 36 years old, he was in excellent health, respected in the community, and beloved by his loved ones. At the time of his disappearance, Joseph had no health problems or unresolved personal issues. He had even planned for his future, to get married, start a family, and move to Juneau. Interestingly, there is no evidence to indicate that Joseph left his car by the mile 44 sign. The lack of clues, such as blood or pieces of clothing, rule out the possibility of an animal or criminal attack. Anyone who spots Joseph Balderas or has information about him is asked to contact state troopers in Nome. Perhaps the most disturbing missing person case in Alaska involves the Palmer family. The drama is playing out near Anchorage. On June 14, 1999, 15-year-old Michael Palmer returned to Meadow Lake on his bicycle with 2 other boys. At one point, he fell behind the group. When his friends notice his absence, they decide to stop and wait for him. But after he does not appear for some time, they continue on, assuming that Michael has taken a different route home. However, the young man never made it home. A few hours later, his worried mother contacts his friends to find out what happened. They tell her that they saw him lagging behind and haven't seen him since. During the search, Michael's bicycle is found near the Susitna River, and a little further on, in the area around the private jet runway, they find his sneakers. There is no trace of his body or the clothes he was wearing. 11 years later, on 10th April 2010, Michael's brother disappeared. Charles Palmer vanished while riding his snowmobile with family and friends near Talkeetna, Alaska, about 70 miles north of Wasilla. Charles, his older brother Chris, their stepfather, and 2 friends organize a men's trip to the Talkeetna Mountains. On the morning of April 10th, the handlebars of Chris's snowmobile broke, and he was forced to stay at the cabin. According to the group that rode with Charles, everything went smoothly until they returned to the cabin on the main trail. Around 7:15 p.m., Charles separated from the group and repeated the story to his brother. Chucky, as he is also called, was dressed appropriately for the cold weather, but did not have a GPS device, food, or water with him. No one reported his disappearance until the next morning, when an already heavy snowstorm hampered the search. Chucky's snowmobile was found stuck in deep snow 12 miles from the cabin, and the Alaska State Troopers speculate that he likely took a side trail and got stuck in the soft snow. The strange thing in this case is that despite the soft and deep snow, no footprints were found around the snowmobile. Chucky's helmet was also not found. Although it has snowed since his disappearance, it seems unlikely that the snow would have completely obliterated the tracks he would have left had he decided to abandon the sled and search for a main trail or cabin. According to Chris Palmer, the older men drove too fast and Chucky failed to follow them, which confused him. However, the lack of footprints around the snowmobile remains unexplained. The fire chief, Ken Farina, who is involved in the search, admits that he can find no explanation for the boys' disappearance other than the possibility of something unusual or paranormal. No clues or evidence have been found to suggest that Chucky was in the area where the snowmobile was found. In May 2010, after the snow melted, the Alaska State Troopers conducted a second search for Chucky's body, but no trace of him was found. Chucky Palmer was 30 years old when he disappeared, leaving behind 3 daughters. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Michael and Chucky Palmer, Don't hesitate to get in touch with the Alaska State Troopers. It appears that these cases are too small when we look at the full scope and mystery behind the Dark Triangle in Alaska. What has made over 20,000 souls disappear since 1980? We've compiled all the information on that in the video you see on the left of your screens.